Hello, everyone. Welcome to the fourth episode of our Lakes Chat Summer Series. I'm Jennifer Caddick, Vice President of Communications and Engagement here at the Alliance for the Great Lakes. Today, we're talking about plastic pollution. Researchers at the Rochester Institute of Technology estimate that 22 million pounds of plastic enter the Great Lakes each year. And most of the plastic in the Great Lakes is microscopic. It's tiny pieces of plastic that have been broken down from larger pieces of plastic debris. That's a threat to wildlife and to humans. Today, we're talking with Olivia Reda, Alliance's Volunteer Engagement Coordinator, and she encounters plastic pollution in her job every day working with our Adopt a Beach volunteers. Welcome, Olivia. Thanks for joining us today.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
So, Olivia, let's start with a little bit of background in case our listeners aren't familiar with the Alliance's Adopt a Beach program. Tell us a little bit about the program and how it works.
Sure. So our Adopt a Beach program is one of our volunteer programs here at Alliance for the Great Lakes. In a normal year, this program involves about 15,000 volunteers that are taking place all over the Great Lakes region. So that's in all 8 Great Lakes states and on shorelines all over all 5 Great Lakes. So lots of volunteers taking part. Huge shout out to our amazing volunteers and team leaders helping us keep the shorelines clean. So one really neat aspect of this program is that we collect litter data. So not only do our volunteers go out to the shorelines and pick up litter they're finding on the beach and keep the shorelines clean, but they're also keeping track of what they're finding on the beach. So we have tally sheets that our volunteers use to keep track of the type of litter they're finding. So in a typical cleanup, you register online on our website to take part. You can take part as a volunteer. You can also lead your own cleanup and take part as a team leader. And then on that day, you're showing up at the beach, you're meeting up with your volunteers, finding your team leader, and then you're segmenting off into smaller groups. And like I mentioned, you're collecting litter data on the beach. And this data is really helpful for us and others. It helps us to better understand issues like plastic pollution in the Great Lakes. We have a lot of this data going back quite a few years, so it helps us to kind of get a better picture of what we're seeing on the beaches.
Yeah, it's a great program, and this is a pretty impressive data set. I think we have 10, almost 15 years worth of data, and certainly it's hard to talk about specific beaches, but are there any broad trends that you might see within that data that you can tell us about?
Yeah, great question. So our data sets do tend to differ a bit year to year. They differ based on things like how many cleanups we're having that year, where our volunteers are taking part, but we do tend to see some trends. And one of those trends is we find a lot of plastic on our beaches. So each year, a huge percentage of what we're finding, the litter we're finding is composed either partially or completely of plastic. So we find that 80% or above of the litter we're finding on the beaches pretty consistently is composed of plastic. Sometimes that percentage is even higher. In 2019, it was around 90%. So a lot of what we're finding is plastic. We also find that a lot of that plastic litter is quite small. So one of our largest categories of litter that we're finding is what we call tiny trash. So that trash is less than 2.5 centimeters and is composed of plastic, foam, or glass. So those small pieces is a lot of what we're finding. Sometimes volunteers expect to find like a lot of large litter, but often what we're finding is the really small stuff. But this is really important to remove from the beaches as well, because those small pieces are things that wildlife can be ingesting. They're also making their way into the water and polluting our drinking water source. So those small pieces are really important to remove. A lot of our top items found, like I said, are composed of plastic, and some of those items are things like straws, plastic bottle caps, cigarette butts. All of those items are some of our top found items.
Yeah, and I know I've been at beach cleanups where people get really disappointed because they don't have a large volume of trash, but those little pieces are super important to pick up. And it's so amazing. I can't tell you how many times I've been to a beach or shoreline area, and initial look, you think, it looks great. But once you start digging around in that sand or in the rocks, there's a lot there, unfortunately.
Yeah, and it gives you a whole new perspective. Then every time you go to the beach, you kind of see those little plastic shiny pieces sort of showing their way in the sand. So like I said, I always emphasize to volunteers and remind team leaders that even if you don't see a lot initially, there's still a lot of small pieces to be picked up, and that makes a huge difference as well.
For sure. And so, the question is, where is all this litter coming from? How does it end up there?
Great question. Yeah. So in the Great Lakes, when we're on Great Lakes shorelines, the litter that we're finding, the plastic pollution that we're finding is from sources occurring locally. So that's coming from beachgoers leaving litter on the beaches, that's washing up from rivers, streams, combined sewer overflows. So it's coming from, local areas. And this differs from when we're talking about ocean plastic pollution. So the plastic pollution in oceans can often come from, far distances due to things like global ocean currents kind of moving that trash around. So when we're talking about ocean pollution, sometimes it's hard to know where exactly it's coming from. It's moving around quite a bit. Whereas in the Great Lakes, that's all sort of washing up locally.
Yeah. So the problem is us, unfortunately, it sounds like.
Exactly.
So our Adopt a Beach volunteers are doing an amazing job cleaning up beaches.
Yes.
And, I think in a normal cleanup year, they pick up about 50,000 pounds of trash. But at the beginning, we talked about that data from the Rochester Institute of Technology, where they estimate 22 million pounds of trash is going into the lakes. And so volunteers are doing a great job, but volunteers by themselves aren't going to be able to fix this whole problem of plastic pollution in the lakes. So another place to talk about is reducing plastic in the first place. And so with the 4th of July coming up, we know we have a lot of people, I don't know if it's hot in Chicago, it's hot where I am. People are going to be heading out to the lakeshore. Do you have any tips for people on how they can keep plastic off our beaches and out of the lakes?
I do. So you can find a lot of resources on our website. And one of those resources kind of gives you tips on how to have a plastic-free holiday on the beach. So some of those tips include things like using reusable items when you're able to. So using a reusable tote, reusable water bottles, kind of opting for things like reusable utensils when you're able to instead of the plastic alternatives. Also just kind of foregoing items altogether if you're able to. So things like straws, or if you're celebrating, things like balloons, which are great, but there's also a lot of great alternatives that we can use that don't kind of stay in the environment for so long, like things like balloons do. You can also opt for paper items instead of plastic. So wrapping sandwiches and beach snacks in things like wax paper is better than those baggies that could take 1,000 years to degrade in the environment. So it's really staying around in the environment for quite some time. So just kind of making those choices when you're able to is really helpful when you're going out to the beach, kind of planning ahead in those ways. But like I mentioned, lots of other good tips and resources that you can find on our website too.
Yeah, and I'll note that our colleague Michelle Farley, who you can't see on screen, she's behind scenes, she's got some links for you in the chat to all these resources that Olivia mentioned. And I think one of the things to remember with these tips is you're like, oh, I'm not going to leave trash at the beach. Most of the time we don't intend to, right? It's a windy day, something escapes, but that stuff adds up. And so, some of these tips are a great way for people just to start off on the right foot before you even get to the beach, I think.
Exactly.
Olivia, tell us a little bit about some ways people can get involved to help.
Yeah, so there's lots of great ways you can get involved to help. Like I said, there's a lot of resources you can find on our website. So you can take part in our plastics-free Great Lakes Pledge. So you can kind of hold yourself accountable. You can share that with friends and family and community members, encourage them to take part as well, to join you on this journey. We also have a way where you can track your single-use plastic for a day and sort of kind of assess like how much plastic am I using? Where can I use less plastic? Where can I use, plastic alternatives? It's just fun to kind of get creative and sort of be introspective about how much plastic you're using. And you can also join me and many of our other volunteers in our Adopt a Beach program. We would love to see you on the beach. Like I said, you can join as a volunteer. So you can join a cleanup that's already created and just show up on that day and kind of get an idea of what the program's all about. You can also become a team leader and create and lead your own cleanup on the beach of your choice in your community, kind of get others involved with you. So you can join the Adopt a Beach program. We'd love to see you on the beach. And if you have any questions, definitely feel free to reach out to us at the Alliance. I myself am more than happy to help you find a cleanup or start one of your own.
Yeah, and you can find all that, the links in the chat there, greatlakes.org/adoptabeach. And, all different kinds of groups are Adopt a Beach teams. We have people of all ages, all abilities. We have everything from corporate groups to scouting groups to just community organizations. So it's a great way to give back to your community, give back to the Great Lakes you love so much. And we make it super simple. And Olivia does an awesome job of making it really easy for you to run a cleanup if you can't find one in your area. So Olivia, thank you so much for taking some time to talk to us a little bit about Adopt-A-Beach and plastic pollution today. I think that's all the time that we have today, but we hope that you'll all enjoy the Great Lakes this 4th of July holiday, and also try to think about ways to have a plastic-free 4th of July. So thank you so much, Olivia, for joining me. Big thanks to Michelle Farley, my colleague, our colleague on the back end, who's helping to make all of this happen. And don't forget to join us next Tuesday, July 6th at 1 p.m. Eastern, noon Central for our next episode. We'll be talking about harmful algal blooms in the Great Lakes, how they're caused, and what's being done to fix the problem. Thanks so much, and see you next time.